Welcome to another episode of the Remade Life podcast. In this episode, I'm sharing the story of my diagnosis and why I no longer view it as a disease. I'm Coach Danny. Let's talk about it. Are you ready to rewrite your story and embrace a new perspective on healing autoimmune disease? Hey, I'm Daniela Spear, and I'm fascinated by exploring the human body, movement, and how emotions help to create our life's journey. After a transforming experience helped me to heal over 15 years of autoimmune symptoms, I decided to share what it looks like to have a second chance at a more compassionate relationship with my body. In this podcast, I will guide you in building lasting wellness by tapping into your body's innate wisdom, understanding the emotional roots of autoimmune disease, and how to use strength training not just for working out, but as a tool to heal from within. So get ready to revive your most inner joys, rebuild your health, and reclaim your life. This is the Remade Life podcast. Hello. So today I want to share about being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. Honestly, I have hesitated to record this episode because I've mentioned before that I really love to focus on the possibility of healing, and I think that is a much more important story than being diagnosed. However, I wouldn't be here without first going through that diagnosis, and I do believe that it is an important part to share because I know it can relate to someone who is in that part of their journey. So if you have recently been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, know that you're already healing and that this diagnosis is just a part of that journey. So let's get into my story. I was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, or just lupus for short, in 2008. I was 16 years old at the time. So for all the people wondering what my diagnosis was, it's lupus. And hopefully by now you've listened to some of my other episodes and know that I come in with a little bit of sass. And this is a reference to someone on Instagram asking me about what diagnosis that I had, because in my Instagram bio it talks about healing autoimmune symptoms after 15 years. And I don't know, is that a HIPAA violation to just outright ask somebody what is your diagnosis? And I share all of this lightly. I'm not upset that person asked. What was just interesting is that person had tried to make a not so nice comment on one of my posts, and I knew that they had never really interacted with any of my content before because they would know. I have shared about lupus. I just don't share a lot about it anymore, which I'll explain why later in the episode, but just had to throw in that little sass there. All right, so just like many other people, I was diagnosed 2008. I was 16, but the process started long before that. So this is unfortunately a very common experience for those with autoimmune disease, that it often either gets misdiagnosed, overlooked, mislabeled, or it doesn't get addressed very quickly, and it can sometimes take even years to get an accurate diagnosis. For me, I think that process was about 18 months. So I think it was my sophomore year in high school, 2007, maybe. My hair started falling out. So this was very beginning. And I had these little bald patches all over my head. And my dad took me to the dermatologist, and they told me that it was a form of alopecia and gave me some scalp injections. I'm assuming that was some kind of steroid to stimulate the hair follicles, and it worked. My hair started growing back a couple of months later after several treatments of the scalp injections. I don't know if they still do scalp injections. I hope not. That was not fun. But yeah, again, this was 15, 16 years ago at this point. I'm sure and I hope that that process has improved. And so this was fall of 2007. I started to experience some digestive issues. I would feel really nauseous after I ate a meal. Really, it was anything. So it wasn't just certain foods, but every time I ate anything. So we went to the doctor and they recommended I get an ultrasound, or maybe it was an MRI, something like that, of my gallbladder. And I remember that they had me drink some really nasty juice, and then they did the scan. So after that, the decision was to remove my gallbladder, and to this day, I don't understand exactly why it was taken out. But at the time, we just trusted the decision that the doctor made at the time. And I mean, now I really have some feelings about this. I mourn for my little gallbladder because I'm not sure it was really necessary to remove it. I think there may have been more we could have done. And now that I hold this perspective of why do we have to take parts out? It hurts me that my little gallbladder is no longer with us. If a car part isn't working, the solution isn't to just, well, we'll just take it out and then, good luck. No, you fix it. Anyways, I'm going to make myself upset about my poor little gallbladder. So moving on. So around that same time, so this is fall 2007 still, around that same time, I was also experiencing insomnia. I would just wake up in the middle of the night every night. And it was always around the same time. And I wish I had known about those organ clocks, because I think that would have maybe helped us make some kind of correlation between multiple things that were happening, rather than just, again, taking the doctor's recommendation of well, here's some sleep medicine. And, keep in mind that I was a teenager. I was in high school. And I was already getting sleep medication. I even did a study, and there wasn't really much that came from that. It was a sleep study. But I do remember that year for Thanksgiving, my cousin, we had some family from out of town come visit, and my cousin and I shared a bed, and that was the night I finally got some sleep. And I don't know what it was about sharing the bed with my cousin, but shout out to my cousin Erica. And I've told her before that moment was my first little sign that healing was possible, because she helped me to heal my sleep. Was it really her, or was it just some sort of nervous system regulation that was provided by sharing a bed with my cousin? And I don't know, but I tell her that she helped me start healing. And then after the gallbladder surgery, may it rest in peace, my sleep got better too. So side note, I'm not saying that my sleep was miraculously fixed at that point. My sleep has been an ongoing work in progress, and I still have to make very intentional efforts to regulate my sleep even now. All right, so now we are at the spring of 2008, so early in the year, and I started getting some bumps on my skin, mostly on my face. So we went to another dermatologist, and they said, it's just acne. Here's a prescription. So here I am. We've addressed multiple different symptoms at this point, and I've had a surgery, and I've had multiple prescriptions and steroid injections, and right, it's just so interesting to think about how differently I would have handled all of this had I known what I know now. But like I said in the beginning, I wouldn't be here today if I had not gone through this process. So this is all still important. So I don't remember exactly what the prescription was for the acne, but whatever it was, my body did not like it. I had all these welts on my face, and the butterfly rash that's commonly associated with lupus was like even worse. And then I also had these little plaques all over my fingers. We were planning a family trip that year, and I had to renew my passport. So my passport photo from that year, like, oh, I just cringe every time I look at it because my face literally hurts so much from all those welts, and I don't enjoy looking at it. Was I allergic to that medication? Probably, or my body was just at a breaking point. And that was when I started to experience pain in my hands, like in the joints of my fingers, and also it's kind of like exactly where those like plaques on my hands were. We thought it was maybe because like I would sleep with my hands over my head and kind of like my hands were up at my pillow. And I was also playing soccer, and it was just cold outside, so we thought maybe that contributed to it. Eventually the pain went away, and we thought it was just resolved on its own until it wasn't. I remember being at school one day, and in one of my classes, I just suddenly couldn't move my hand anymore. I went to reach for my pencil, and I could hardly open my hand. Like my fingers were just like curled up, and it really hurt to try to open my hand. So I just like raised my hand and was like, "Can I go to the nurse's office?" And I don't remember exactly what happened at the nurse's office, but I do remember that day I went home and I told my mom that something was seriously wrong and we needed to go back to the doctor. So we went back a few days later, and my doctor asked if I had heard of lupus. And I actually had, very briefly though. There was a model on America's Next Top Model, and she shared that she had lupus. And honestly, maybe this is where my intuitive nature comes in, but I remember watching that episode just like several months before all this. And I remember thinking, like, what if I have lupus? And no, I hadn't watched any episodes of House because I know that show is like very commonly associated with lupus, or like lupus is associated with that show because they just apparently always think that it's lupus on that show. So I wasn't like influenced by that. I just remember seeing that episode of America's Next Top Model. I saw that girl talking about it, and I remember thinking, what if I have lupus? Because I was like, going through a lot of like mysterious things that I didn't fully understand. And I don't know, maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe it was my intuition. Who knows? So I got referred to a rheumatologist, and I did some more blood work. And in about May, June 2008, that's when I was diagnosed with lupus. So I officially received a diagnosis. And I was started on a fairly high dose of prednisone and Plaquenil, and the doctor said that I'd have a relatively normal life just to take my medicine every day. Normal, like, yeah, okay, dude. We didn't get much information other than I needed to go back 3 months later for a follow-up. He handed my mom and I just those little trifold brochures. And, all we knew was the information that we were given. And we didn't really research much outside of that because we just trusted that what the doctor said was true. And, I've said this before, but I feel like I should say it again, that, none of this is to knock the Western medical approach. I think that initially taking an approach through Western medicine definitely saved my life, and it was the treatment that I needed at the time. Would I maybe take a different approach today? Yeah, but I have different information now than I knew then. But anyways, so that summer we went to Colombia on our family vacation, and my mom took me to a naturopathic doctor there. And he prescribed me some drops. It was like these little dropper bottles, and I have no idea what was in them. But again, went with what the doctor told us, and I took them. I definitely wouldn't now because, as I said, like I ask too many questions now. I take a different approach, but that's just life, right? You grow and you learn and you do better. So I had gone to the beach with a family friend. So we had gone to Colombia, I came back, and a couple weeks later, I'd actually gone on another trip with a friend of mine and her family. And I remember carrying around this little like water bottle just so that I could like take the drops at like exactly every 3 hours. And I wanted to do it perfectly because, you know, if you can't do it perfect, why do it at all? I'm totally kidding. But that's how I felt at the time. So I can't confirm or deny whether the drops worked, but I do know that at my 3-month follow-up appointment, the ANA markers were down. So that was a good thing. Unfortunately, shortly after that, my protein levels were extremely high. And so I had to do this like 24-hour urine sample collection, which was not a fun experience. Like I did not enjoy that. It was just, the smell was not great to just collect my urine for 24 hours. So after I'd like returned that to the hospital or wherever it was, I'd gotten a call a couple days later about needing to do a kidney biopsy, and I was referred to a pediatric nephrologist. And a couple days after that, I was at the hospital getting ready to get my kidney biopsy, which was supposed to be like a 1-day thing, but I ended up staying at the hospital for 4 or 5 days. The biopsy had confirmed that I had stage 4 kidney disease and that I was diagnosed with lupus nephritis. So immediately I started chemotherapy with Cytoxan, and I think I was supposed to do about 6 treatments, 1 each month for 6 months, but I ended up only needing about 4. And then we switched to the oral form Cellcept, which I took from 2008 to 2012, so for about 4 years. Being in high school and having to go through this whole experience, I didn't really know how to explain it to my friends, and I remember other kids would ask me if I had cancer because they heard that I was in chemotherapy. And there were just a lot of things that I like missed because of the chemotherapy sessions, and then the like following Mondays after those sessions, when I'd be back at school, I'd always feel so nauseous and I just like wouldn't eat lunch at school. Like it just wasn't easy to hide. And I also remember I had to pee a lot because of the chemotherapy, and I had to drink a ton of water. And I remember peeing at school, and there was like some other girls in the bathroom, and one of them said, "Dang, is she pouring a bucket?" And then they both laughed and ran out of the bathroom, and I like immediately stopped my pee because I was so embarrassed in that moment. I mean, like as an adult, like I know high school kids are just like ruthless, but at the time, like it really hurt. And what I'll say to that is that if you know a teenager that is currently going through a chronic illness, reach out to them and give them some extra kindness and let them know that you care about them, that they are important, that they are valued. Because being in middle or high school is hard enough, but when you're trying to figure out who you are amongst your peers and then you get slapped with a diagnosis, it's really easy for that to become your identity. And like suddenly you're just like the sick kid. And that really sucks. But I'm really thankful that I had supportive friends. I don't think that we had a lot of conversations about it. I'm sure they also didn't really know what to ask, but also they were just there and they were understanding without asking a lot of questions, which I really appreciated at the time. And I was also really thankful to have the support of the Lupus Foundation of North Carolina. They were just amazing, and they still are. I've made some great connections and friends over the years of being a part of the Lupus Foundation. And when I was diagnosed, they had this group for teens, and we went to a hockey game one year, and it was just really nice to connect with other kids that understood how hard that experience was. So I really appreciated that. Okay, so that was the story of my early days of autoimmunity and being diagnosed with lupus. That was 15 years ago, so obviously that's not the whole story, but I wasn't really sure where to cut off. Where do you what's the cutoff of this is the beginning and then this is the middle and this is the end. But I did want to just try to keep the focus on the early days of when I was initially diagnosed. And I know I will share more stories and some of those other experiences as they come up. But know that you can always reach out to me on Instagram at daniela.spear or send me an email at hello@remadewellness.com. If you're just not super active on social media, I'd tell you to call me, but I don't want that. So if you do have any questions about my early experiences, or if you just want someone to listen and relate to what you're experiencing now, please reach out. You don't have to experience any of that alone. And when I was initially diagnosed, it was 2008, so Instagram wasn't even around yet, and there wasn't that ease of finding other people online or connecting with other people on social media about it. So it was really lonely, but like I said, I had really supportive friends, and my family was very supportive, and the Lupus Foundation was a great resource. But if you feel any kind of loneliness, reach out to someone, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me as well. Okay, let's answer the question that I know you're probably all wondering is, why don't I talk about having lupus anymore? If you are connected with me on social media, you'll see that these days I talk about autoimmune disease, and even then I mostly say autoimmune symptoms. I don't really love calling it a disease anymore either. I try to just say autoimmunity, but I also refer to things as autoimmune symptoms when I'm sharing about flare-ups or my own experiences. And this is all very strategic. And no, I'm not trying to be mysterious or pretend that I was never diagnosed with lupus. It's actually all a very intentional part of my own healing process. Last year, I had a really powerful transformation. It was a just incredible transformative experience where I felt God telling me that it was time to release my sick identity and embrace my identity as a healer. It really took time to release that part of me whom I call sick Daniela, which I know can sound a little weird, but I know that it makes sense to those of you that have also had identity shifting experiences. You know what it's like to recognize the headspace you were in before and then the headspace you are in now. And I still very much love sick Daniela. She helped me to get to where I am now, but her mindset was just very different from the mindset that I have now. And I don't blame her. I think sick Daniela was just doing the best she could to survive with the information she had and live through a very dysregulated nervous system that showed up in her immune system as autoimmunity. And she just didn't know it at the time. But when I became aware that I was operating and making decisions for my life from a sick person perspective, I started to shift that. And it wasn't an overnight transformation by any means. I'm still working on this. If you listen to episode 2, Rewriting My Autoimmune Narrative, I share about this experience. That was a really good episode and actually still my most listened to episode. So if you haven't listened to it yet, I will link it in the show notes, so make sure you check that out as well. So now I make it an intentional effort to not identify myself with the disease because it's not who I am. I no longer make decisions based on having a disease, but I make decisions based on the life that I want to live, which is free from disease. And it's also a very intentional decision to not affirm disease over my life, to not like speak that over my life. Like those are just like very different. It is a very different mindset. So saying I have lupus ties me to the experience that comes with lupus. But saying that I have experienced symptoms that are labeled as lupus, it kind of creates this distinction that lupus is something that I experience, but it's not something that I own or is like a part of me or it is me. So to me, the words that we use to talk about ourselves and our experiences really matter. Even using the word disease, like I'm very careful about when I use that word and how I use it, because I've come to understand that the symptoms our body experiences, they come from a place of protection and understanding that our body is always working for us and in our favor to protect us from either internal or external stressors. That really challenges you to consider like what is a disease and what creates disease in the body and what is just the body doing what the body does. So knowing that inflammation, fatigue, and pain, like even if it is chronic, is my body communicating with me and telling me that it needs to be supportive? I just don't think that sounds like a disease to me, at least not anymore. To me, that sounds like it's working how it's supposed to be working and it's not being silenced. Saying it's a disease, in my opinion, is disrespectful and, dare I say, gaslighting to the body, telling our body that it's confused when it's asking for help. Gosh, I don't know about that anymore. It's like it's a different mindset. Like I said, it's just a different headspace. And I'm still very much in the early stages of this new season and this new way of approaching dis-ease and dysregulation in the body. So I am learning as I'm sharing this with all of you. And I'm still learning and practicing how to trust the wisdom of my own body and not give that credit to something that is outside of me. I want to honor my body's experience and everything that it tells me. And I aim to have an ongoing conversation with my body where I'm still learning its language and still pulling back a lot of layers. So for me to wake up achy and with brain fog and joint pain and say, oh, it's just lupus, like this is just lupus, it's actually a total disregard for my body's own language and needs when it's trying to tell me that it's holding on to too much. I cannot continue to give that credit to something else. It's my body communicating through a specific set of symptoms, which just happen to be labeled as lupus from the Western medical perspective. And this is why I no longer say I have lupus or I'm a lupus warrior or a lupus sister or anything like that. I'm Daniela, and I experience autoimmune symptoms when I contribute to creating an environment where symptoms become necessary. Gosh, it has taken me so much internal work. I've done a ton of internal work and acceptance for me to get to a place where I can say that without feeling guilt or shame. I want to say it again. I am Daniela, and I experience autoimmune symptoms when I contribute to creating an environment where symptoms become necessary. I think it takes so much bravery to be able to recognize how we contribute to the experiences of our own body. So, shout out to me and shout out to anyone else that is not afraid to take that responsibility, because I know it's not easy. Like I said, it's taken me a lot of work to arrive at being able to say that without feeling like I'm just blaming myself, like I, created the disease. It's not about the blame, or it's not about who or what created it. It's just about recognizing that your body is experiencing symptoms for a reason. And how do we get curious and have willingness to explore that instead of just trying to silence it? So it is a very different approach. I'm very proud of the work that I've done to be able to recognize where and how I contribute to what my body feels without making that mean anything bad about me as a person. Because if I contribute to the problem, I can also contribute to the solution. And that, my friends, is called healing. All right, that is all I have for you in this episode. Thank you for joining me. And if anything in this episode resonated with you, I definitely want to hear from you. Would you please consider leaving me a review to help others find this podcast too? It would mean a lot to me for you to help me share this resource with other people. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, be well, my friends.